When you think of the Marx Brothers, it's usually the legendary wit of Groucho or the zany antics of Harpo that come to mind first. Often overlooked by casual fans, Chico Marx was the eldest Marx brother, and in many ways, the group's leader behind the scenes for much of its illustrious run. He also lived a life worthy of the wildest gossip columns Hollywood has ever known. Known womanizer, Chico's bold attempt at picking up actress Tallulah Bankhead, as well as her response to his pickup attempt, has become the stuff of Hollywood legend. But we'll come to that later. Leonard Chico Marx was born on March 22, 1887. He's known as the oldest of the Marx brothers, but this was not originally the case. Chico actually had an older brother named Manfred. Sadly, this firstborn Marx did not live past infancy, leaving Chico destined for the role of the firstborn. Perhaps due to the tragic passing of Manfred during his infancy, family accounts recall that the Marx brothers' parents treated Chico with an extra level of shelter and affection, leading many to conclude that he was their favorite son. What kind of a Hollywood family would the Marx brothers be if they didn't have at least some internal strife and drama? Despite having gotten along well as adults, their mother's favoring of Chico caused Groucho to feel some resentment towards him during their childhood. Their mother even nicknamed Groucho the Jealous One because of this. Due to the humble and impoverished origins of the Marx family, Chico developed less than ideal survival tactics from a young age. As a kid, he became an expert at swiping things from anyone and everyone. This ranged from things he thought his family could use to things he just plain wanted. Young Chico's swiping habit became so commonplace that he didn't restrict his targets to strangers. According to how Groucho remembered it, Chico would frequently swipe materials from his own father's tailoring business, including his father's money and scissors. Ironically, this probably placed great stress on the dad's ability to earn an income, further perpetuating Chico's need to take other people's stuff. Chico spent a lot of his childhood trying to outsmart and swindle delinquents on the streets of New York City. He spent a great deal of his time in pool rooms, even at a very young age. By the time he turned 13, his friends already included street idlers and gamblers. Chico's time in pool rooms as a kid would later prove to be one of the most destructive influences of his entire life. It kickstarted what would become his very extreme gambling problem. From his early youth on, anyone who knew Chico or followed his private life would associate him with this habit more than just about anything. In addition to the typical things like gambling on playing cards, pool, and races, Marx would bet money on things as minor and unpredictable as what letters would appear on the license plates of passing cars, or even what direction raindrops would fall in. Despite all the suffering it caused, one good thing did come out of Chico's gambling habit. A friend of Chico's created the Marx brothers' now irreplaceable nicknames during a poker game. This friend simply thought it would be fun to come up with rhyming names for each brother, representing something unique about each of their personalities. Each of the brothers' nicknames represented something distinct about their individual personalities or interest. In Chico's case, he got his nickname for a less than flattering reason. From a young age, he'd always had an unhealthy obsession with pursuing intimate encounters with women, or chasing chicks as the slang goes. Because of the origin of this name, Marx's name is meant to be pronounced Chico, as to represent his interest in chicks, unlike the common Spanish name of the same spelling, which is pronounced Chico. The Marx brothers are known for their comedy, but some of them also had impressive musical talents, Chico chief among them. Over the course of his life, he became fairly well respected and appreciated as a piano player. Even dyed-in-the-wool fans who have seen him play piano in Marx Brothers movies are surprised to learn he worked much of his life as a pianist. Despite having grown up to be one of the three main on-screen Marx Brothers, Chico originally wasn't part of the family act at all. Due to his piano lessons, he had started a solo show business career as a traveling musician long before the rest of his brothers began their group together on the vaudeville circuit. And when the family act did begin, you can bet Chico made sure he was front and center. So how did Chico go from solo musician to core member of the family's comedy act? Well, it all started one night in Illinois, when the schedule of Chico's musical act and his brother's comedy act happened to coincide. When Chico realized this was happening, he decided to give his brothers a little surprise. While his brothers performed on stage, Chico hid his face and pretended to just be a piano player in the theater's backing orchestra. Then, in the middle of the performance, one of the brothers recognized him. Hardly a few seconds had passed before Chico and his brothers interrupted the whole planned show to horse around in front of the audience. In addition to his gambling habit, Chico spent his entire life compulsively chasing intimate encounters with as many women as he could. He became the first brother to marry when he tied the knot with Betty Carp in 1917, but he could never manage to remain faithful to her. According to some accounts, he even cheated on Betty as early as their honeymoon. Chico could never go more than a short while without having some kind of an extramarital romantic affair. Whenever the brothers were on the road for a tour or a show, Chico would make his way to the lobby of whatever hotel they were staying in and just start playing piano until a female guest came over to listen. More often than not, this ploy worked. Despite Chico's chronic unfaithfulness, his wife Betty did everything in her power to try and make their marriage work. The couple had one child, a daughter named Maxine, born a year into their marriage. Many recall Betty's immense patience and willingness to forgive. These attributes of hers are probably the sole reason that this unstable marriage lasted for a full 30 years. Despite looking nothing alike in their iconic costumes, Chico and Harpo looked very similar in real life. So much so that people often confused them for one another. Chico often used this to his advantage, impersonating Harpo for both good and for bad. At times, this actually prevented Harpo from being able to get jobs, since places that had bad experiences with Chico would assume they were the same person. Chico spent much of his youth engaged in sleazy behavior and schemes. On one occasion, when Harpo became aware of a deal available on cuckoo clocks, he tried to buy some to resell for a profit, only to discover that Chico had already used this information to sell defective clocks all over town, ruining Harpo's business before it even began. A lot of fans are surprised to learn that, despite his recklessness and instability, Chico acted in many ways as the leader of the Marx Brothers behind the scenes. After their mother retired as the group's manager, Chico took over those duties and handled all of their business dealings, including landing their movie opportunities and negotiating their contracts. The Marx Brothers planned on retiring after their 1941 film, The Big Store, and they even advertised the film as their big farewell. Nevertheless, due to Chico's compulsive gambling, he desperately needed money. So, to help their brother out, the team got back together in 1946 and made the film A Night in Casablanca, solely for the benefit of his bank account. When the Marx Brothers slowed down from performing as a group, Chico began a now largely forgotten second career as the leader of his own big band, known as the Chico Marx Orchestra. He found some success with this group, but that's not all. This group also discovered and introduced the world to future singing star Mel Torme, when Torme was only 17 years old. Consistent with his attitude towards his marriage and his piano playing, Marx never took his job as a comedian too seriously. He often showed up late and unprepared, frequently leaving his brothers scrambling to try and cover for his absence. On some occasions, he came out on stage and couldn't even remember his lines. Money and gambling never failed to motivate Chico. Backstage before a show one night, Groucho challenged Chico by briefly holding up a dollar bill. He then hit it to see if Chico could recite the entire serial number from memory. To everyone's surprise, Chico succeeded at this task. In vintage Chico style, he then went out on stage and forgot his lines. Tragically, Chico never managed to lick the gambling problem that he developed during his youth. Decades later, someone asked Chico how much money he had lost gambling over the course of his life. Chico remarked, "Ask Harpo how much money he has. That's how much I've lost." Despite having been well respected as a musician, Chico never really seemed to care all that much about the piano. Perhaps due to his lackadaisical attitude towards the concept of taking responsibility, he never practiced his instrument and just relied on his raw, natural talent, something he had a lot of. Although he lacked a studious side, many say that Chico had a natural talent for understanding mathematics. He also had an impressively accurate photographic memory. Groucho once remarked that had Chico chosen to go into academia, he could have been a very successful mathematician. The most identifiable part about Chico on the screen is the exaggerated Italian accent that he always spoke in. Needless to say, his voice did not really sound that way. He merely used the accent as part of his on-screen persona. But that wasn't the reason he originally created the voice. Long before his show business career began, a young Chico learned to imitate accents of the various ethnic groups that lived around him in New York City, in order to fit in wherever he went. One of the most shocking moments in Chico's life came completely out of the blue. When officers examined the body of Bugsy Siegel, the famous old-time gangster who built the first Las Vegas casinos, they found a check from Chico Marx in his pocket. It remains unclear why Chico had written this shady character a check. Groucho felt relieved on Chico's behalf to know that Bugsy Siegel had lost his life before attempting to cash Chico's check. He felt that this narrowly allowed Chico to avoid disasters, since, knowing his brother well, the check probably would have bounced. If Bugsy had lived on to discover this, he probably would have sought mob-style retribution against the unfortunate comedian. Towards the end of Chico's life, his gambling got completely out of control. It became clear to his entire family that he'd never overcome the bad habit. As a result, his brothers banded together and took control of his finances. They managed all his money in his final years and only gave him access to a specific fixed allowance each month. Chico famously did not make excuses or apologies for his wild behavior, but he did make one exception. Just days before his passing, after a long and jovial call with his daughter Maxine, Chico's emotional side came out unexpectedly. He apologized to his daughter for the stress and deprivation his gambling caused their family during her childhood. On October 11th, 1961, Chico became the first Marx brother to pass away. His family and friends were understandably upset when attending his funeral, but things got weird fast when a man that none of them recognized stood up to give a eulogy. Things got even weirder when the man's eulogy described Chico's life and personality in completely inaccurate ways. Shocked and confused, Harpo reacted by telling Maxine, "When I go, do me a favor and hire a mime." Even though Chico remained one of the three main Marx brothers for as long as the group performed together, and even though he lived a life full of legendary shenanigans, a lot of fans still overlook his role in the group to this day. In an online fan poll by Turner Classic Movies, Chico surprisingly finished last in terms of which brother the public finds the funniest. He even finished behind Zeppo, the brother who played minor, non-comedic roles in only the first few Marx Brothers films. Chico Marx's pursuits of women knew no bounds. On one occasion, he attended a party where he met old Hollywood star Tallulah Bankhead. Bankhead also happened to be the daughter of a congressman. Yet none of that fame and prestige slowed Chico down one bit. As soon as they met, right in front of everyone at the party, Chico bluntly informed Bankhead that he wanted to sleep with her. Incredibly, this also worked. Bankhead reportedly replied, "And so you shall, you old-fashioned boy." This story is now the stuff of Hollywood legend. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. We'd really appreciate it. We also invite you to check out the companion article in the description below. If you want to see even more videos on historical figures, please subscribe to the channel.